Those red stars are new healthcare facilities, hospitals, expansion of beds. The green are the current ones. As I traveled across the state in my bus tour that I've talked to you about a lot, we focused on law enforcement the last time we met about that issue and what I learned traveling, of how short we were in law enforcement, how we needed to step up at the state level. Part of that is part of this, because we were told over and over in rural Texas, as in our big cities, that our jails have become the place that where people with mental health care issues are, because we don't have enough places for them. Chairman Colcourse will actually give you some numbers on that wait list, and it's astonishing compared to the civilian population. And then one of my first trips up in the Panhandle in Amarillo with Judge Tanner from Potter County, a very strong voice, and she said we need mental health care beds here in Amarillo. For example, a sheriff who arrests someone here with a mental health care issue might have to drive all the way to Wichita Falls today to find a bed for them if one exists. So we wanted to place these around the state where most sheriffs are within a few hours of being able to take someone to one of these facilities for help. This is an expansion of over $2 billion in the budget out of our surplus to build these hospitals. So that's part of what Chair Colcourse will talk to you about today. The second part is working with communities where we add beds to existing hospitals, and she'll walk through that plan. And then that's Senate Bill 26 today, and then Senate Bill 25 and Senate Bill 26 will pass today. As I've said to you before these major bills that are complex, I like to do these press conferences so the people who write the bills can answer your questions and you can really get your arms around it instead of listening to 3 hours of committee meetings or 3 hours of debate on the floor, although I think this will pass unanimously. I think you have 26 co-authors already. And then Senate Bill 25 that's already passed, because you have to have staff. So we passed a bill for nursing scholarships. We have scholarships for a number of areas where we need expertise. For math teachers, science teachers, they can get scholarships today. Law enforcement can get full scholarships today. Doctors, we pay most of the doctor tuition cost in Texas, but we need nurses. So now we're paying the full ride for nurses, because we need everything from psychologists to psychiatrists to nurses. You'll have telehealth. You'll have all of this in the biggest package for mental health care ever designed in the United States. And I'm proud as Lieutenant Governor. My staff told me this last year. I didn't know this. We have invested more in mental health care since I become Lieutenant Governor from the Senate, and the House has signed up, and we appreciate their support on this bill and other bills along with us. But we need to do more, because we do not have enough beds to meet the need. So with that, let me turn it over to Chair Colcourse, and I will tell you that there's not a star on there for Midland, but I believe that's going to be worked out in conference, because that was kind of a late entry to the system. And this will, in the years ahead, we want to do even more. Chair Colcourse?
Thank you. Thank you, Governor Patrick, for your work. I will just say that both of us ran a campaign last year, and I remember where I was standing when Governor Patrick called me and said, we're going to build more mental health beds, and we're going to be very aggressive about the issue of mental health in the state of Texas. Although prior to that, Governor, you had already, through our work, invested $1.5 billion. And so, I kind of asked him, what does that look like? And he said, let's just keep working on it. And so it was a ton of feedback. I want to thank Chair Huffman and Chair Bonin for what they put aside in House Bill 1, Senate Bill 1. It will eventually be House Bill 1. $2.321 billion that said we're going to go and we're going to attack this problem and look at it. So when we started, it was kind of loosely defined. There were a lot of members that gave us great input. Man, some of them had gotten with their LMHAs and they came with very firm plans. Others came and said, hey, I want a plan for expanding like El Paso. And I said, we're done planning. We have lots of reports and we know what we need to do, so let's put the money to work. And so through that process, we were able to come up with this plan. And I will tell you that it's not, as the governor says, it's not set in stone yet. We're working with our House members and getting their input as we move through. But I will tell y'all this, when we sat down and really looked at what is the wait list, define who cannot get a bed right now, it was shocking. It was absolutely shocking that out of almost 2,500 people that were waiting on the bed list, all but 73 were waiting for forensic beds. Can I say that again? All but 73 were waiting for forensic beds. Of those, roughly 1,000 were what we call maximum security unit beds. And so looking at that as being the issue, how do we help? I think this is a civil rights issue. You shouldn't be waiting in jail to have your restoration, your mental competency restored, to wait to go to trial. And so when we looked at creating different places, like in Amarillo, we're going to look to do a number of beds up there, between 100 and 150 beds. We're asking for at least 50% of those to be forensic beds. And you might say, well, are we going to forever need these forensic beds? In our design, what we're going to be able to do is to be able to, you know, those can be swing beds. They can be dedicated as forensic beds as we need them, and then move them into civil beds if needed, and obviously adolescent beds as well. You look at Lubbock and out in West Texas, we were able to identify some land that the state already owned, and we're going to be able to put 50 maximum security beds. And I will tell y'all that MSU beds, those are not swing beds. They have to be dedicated to that. And these are people that sometimes will be there. That competency can take well over a year. So those beds don't move very quickly. We're going to do the same down in RGV with maximum security beds. Victoria County, in that area, they've been asking for help for a long time. That will serve probably, Governor, 12 to 15 counties. You look at what we're doing with Uvalde and their behavioral health center there, of course, out of the crisis that we saw, with some dedicated beds there for both adult and for adolescent. Y'all know that over a period of time, we have rebuilt the Austin State Hospital. Those beds are hopefully coming online very soon. San Antonio State Hospital, we're going to be up and running hopefully this summer. We were able to identify one of the buildings that we're going to vacate, and we're going to dedicate 40 maximum security unit beds at that facility, and it'll be very cost effective. And so as you look at the state of Texas, we're putting these in strategic places. The UT Southwestern partnership, those are over 200 beds. They're dedicating forensic beds. And in partnership, they're also doing another, I think it's almost 200 adolescent beds. We're going to rebuild in this plan Terrell. Rusk is finally coming online with the money, Governor, that we dedicated in 2015. And so as we look with Dunn down in Houston, we're actually adding more beds to that and bringing more beds online. Some of those beds are going to be dedicated to CPS and some of the problems that we've seen there. And so a perfect plan, maybe not yet, but I can tell you it's a plan and it's a way forward, and I'm very excited about that. But here's one other thing that hasn't gotten a lot of attention, and that is that a lot of communities have said to me as the chair, and a lot of the members have come to me and said, oh my gosh, we need respite beds. We need these respite beds. And so, we were kind of thinking about how do we do that, and looking at Senate Bill 292 and House Bill 13 by Forprice and by Huffman. We partnered with our communities on jail restoration and also grants to the LMHAs. So I took a play out of their playbook and said we're going to set aside $100 million of the $2.321 billion, and we're going to say we're going to partner with you for what I call respite beds, diversion beds. They may be a 72-hour place where somebody can come and cool down. I've heard from members to say, let's get people to a place where they don't end up in our jails, where they don't end up and committing crimes. And so super excited about this. This is really played out in Rider 40 of the General Appropriations Act, Rider 40, which will, we just substituted out. It'll be House Bill 1 on the Senate floor next week. I also want to go quickly into Senate Bill 26. I have 28 joint or co-authors on that, and we'll hear that on the floor today. Now, this again is another historic investment. So when all tell, you look at this budget, I estimate that we're going to invest upwards to $3.5 billion absolute new dollars in our mental health system. And so looking at that, you know, coming out of COVID-19, it has been a crisis. We see this with our adolescents. We see that with our adults. The forensic population, Governor, actually before COVID was a little less than 1,000 as we waited for forensic beds. Again, exploded to nearly 2,500. So we're going to address those, and we're going to work through both civil commitments and forensic commitments. So Senate Bill 26 delivers clear direction for several programs funded in the budget to make sure these funds are spent on patients, treatments, and beds, not just bureaucracy. It guarantees results. The bill creates transparency and accountability for our many community health systems to ensure that services are truly getting to those that need it most. We know in interim hearings and testimony over the last few sessions that mental health needs are increasing, as I said, especially for adolescents and children. I recently received a letter from a mother and a resident of Cleveland, Texas, who reached out to my office in desperate assistance for her 14-year-old child who has been diagnosed with several emotional and behavioral disorders and is no longer able to live with the family due to violent outbursts. This is a constituent of Senator Nichols. I walked over on the Senate floor and I shared the letter with him, and he literally looked at me and said, "This is the saddest story." And, you know, my reply back to her is, we're going to help you. We are going to find a way to help with this treatment. So Senate Bill 26 takes steps to de-escalate a family crisis through the creation of an innovation grant matching program that would provide funding opportunities to a variety of local providers. The state doesn't always have to do this. There are great nonprofits doing wonderful work out there. We have local mental health providers that are doing wonderful work. And so it's $15 million set aside in these innovation grants to address that adolescent crisis. Also, the bill creates a discharge and transition program to help a person in a state hospital to step down gradually to make their way to a supportive, safe setting in the community once they leave the hospital. When you're discharged, what's the next step? And so Senate Bill 26 strives to answer that question and get those services. Senate Bill 26 drives an effort to improve community health programs around the state by requiring performance audits on our community-based mental health and behavioral health systems known as local mental health and behavioral health authorities. And again, that is feedback on, we have funded them at historic amounts. We just want to make sure that those services are actually getting to our constituents. And I will say that finally, Senate Bill 26 directs our state HHSC agency to consider new funding options for nursing homes that could provide a long-term placement for individuals with high behavioral health needs who might otherwise be living in our state mental hospitals. So we call them 365ers. They're there. They're absolutely there. We've heard from testimony from their parents. They are in Austin State Hospital. And that's probably not the most appropriate setting. They need to be able to go to another setting. And so we're going to look at current options that we have out there, how we can partner with some of those in our state and get them to a better place. The bill in the end is about a solution that helps Texas address the needs of every single community by offering the right place with the right help. I want to thank Senator Huffman. Everyone's in a committee this morning. We were talking about, I was running from Business and Commerce, and I know Education's meeting, Higher Education's meeting, and State Affairs is right behind us. But the input from our senators and House members has been tremendous. And we still have a few weeks to do some work on this, but y'all can tell that my enthusiasm about this is that you have to define the problem to solve the problem. And that is what we're trying to do. When I went to the lieutenant governor, after he had a very, very big and bold, I can tell you exactly where I was standing. It was in my house, in my pantry. And, you know, when you see Dan Patrick pop up on your phone, you probably should answer it, and I did. And he said, hey, listen, we're going to really do something about our mental health problem. I've heard from county judges. And so when we really got into the weeds of it, one of the requirements in Rider 40 is that every bed that we'll build is, 50% of it needs to be at least some kind of forensic bed. And that will be negotiated with the House. But we can no longer have nearly 2,500 men and women sitting in our county jails waiting for mental restoration. On the same side, we need those civil beds and we need adolescent beds, but not everybody needs a bed. And that's what I love about this approach, is that we're going to give tools to our local communities to also offer, like I said, kind of a way to say, we're going to, try to catch them on the front end, get them the help necessary. We're going to audit those dollars and make sure that those services are being delivered in Senate Bill 26. And then finally, if you do need that bed, we're going to have it available. And in the end, when you're released, we're going to help you and make sure that you go back to the correct setting and you're able to integrate back into society. So with that, I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor. Really, I never dreamed that we would have the opportunity to have nearly, $3 billion to address a problem as Chair of Health and Human Services. This is an opportunity of a lifetime to be able to help and direct our communities in a time that we really do need it. And post-pandemic, we need it more than ever. It was a problem before the pandemic, but it has certainly escalated since the pandemic.
And you mentioned Senator Nichols very quickly. This whole concept really began back in 2015 because Rusk Hospital has been the state hospital for very serious people in jail who have serious crimes, who need maximum security, or they're held there until they're competent for trial. And that had served the Houston area, big areas, and it looked like something out of the movie The Shining, if you went there. It was built in the 1880s.
Yeah.
And he literally took us there. I remember going up there on a trip. I'd just been elected lieutenant governor, and he invited people in. We said we have to do something. And so this all started in 15, and we spent the money out of the rainy day fund at that point in time. And so we worked on 5 hospitals, either refurbishing or rebuilding or building new. And when I went out and met Judge Tanner, and Judge Tanner, if you're listening, I said we would do this a year ago, almost 14 months ago exactly. Said we'll do this, and we're going to expand on that idea. And this is, a lot of questions about the surplus in the budget. What do you do with the money? Yesterday, we had the retired teachers here because we had the money to do something we've never been able to do. We had about $4.5 billion to put into a COLA for them. Here's another close to $3 billion. This is a return back to taxpayers that are really life-changing things. There will be constitutional amendments this year that people will vote on a wide variety of issues of how to get the money back to them. Of course, property tax is a major part of that, but the surplus is the people's money. Remember this, it's not our money. So how do we best get it back to them in all forms, whether it's for retired teachers, health care benefits, mental health care hospitals, the $350 million we have in for law enforcement in rural Texas. This is what we're doing with their money. And a lot of this was baked in the first budget, HB 1 and Senate Bill 1, that Dr. Bonin and Chair Huffman have already agreed on, most of these big spending items. So this is exciting. We're going to leave here whenever session ends. We're going to leave, and we're still going to have billions remaining because you don't spend all the money. We have to be sure we have the money to continue the ongoing programs. For example, if you give raises like we're doing to teachers across the board, well, we have to do that forever. You don't take it back. And then there are projects like this that are, you invest hundreds of millions of dollars to build a hospital, and then you move on from that. And so, not that it doesn't need maintenance and staffing, but there's one-time expenses and ongoing. So we're being very careful in our budgeting, and I want to be sure that not only do we have a healthy balance in addition to our rainy day fund, that we're able to maintain everything we're doing, that we're able to keep our commitments, but that for a legislature that's here 10, 20 years from now, that will build upon this foundation. California had a $100 billion surplus. They spent all the money and ended up in a $22 billion hole. We're not going to do that. I don't want to put a legislative body at risk long after we're all gone and after you've all retired. You know, years down the road said, you know, they didn't handle it right when they could have. And so we're working really hard in the Senate with every committee, with the House, to make sure we do this right. But our primary focus is on things that really change lives. So we'll take a few questions.
Can I ask a clarifying question first, just on your graph? I was wanting to make sure, so the green dots, those are obviously existing state hospitals. The green dots with the stars on top of them, are those ones that are like getting renovations or additional beds?
Yes, yeah. So if you look at Terrell, you know, we're probably raising that, and we're going to right size it. One of the things that I became very aware of is that we have a lot of beds out there and we can't staff them.
Right.
And they're in hard to staff places like Wichita Falls. And so when we rebuild, we're going to right size for that and shift some. But in total, if you look at the number of beds that we're adding with some of the contract, I believe it's almost 1,000 new beds, 944.
That actually follows up, that actually hits on my follow-up question.
Yeah.
Do you have a breakdown by chance of like the different types of beds, like forensic versus forensic or the silent offenders versus?
I do. I can give that to you.
The goal
Yeah.
was, and you know, when we say forensic, and I've had some people, what's a forensic bed? Well, those are beds dealing with people who have been arrested, they're in our jails. So our real goal, because that's where the wait list is longest, where people have been sitting in jail for hundreds of days. Hundreds of days. And so it's to help the adolescent population with their mental health care needs, the general civilian population, and then to take some of the pressure off the jails, and not just for the benefit of the jail population, but for their own health care, to give them a chance to get well. So she's done an incredible job.
Yeah, and I want to say this too, forensic, you know, like a lot of times when we go to the local mental health authority, they go, oh no, we don't want forensic. That's what we need right now. But you can design them, again, that they can, you know, on different wings and units. And so that's what we're really looking to do, is flexibility. Not on your maximum security units. Obviously, those are very special beds. You know, we have added in Kerrville. We're about to ramp up to the full capacity there in Kerrville, and so, you know, it's complicated. And you know, I suspect, Governor, that I may be coming back to you next session and saying, let's tweak this a little bit, but
Sure.
This will be a building. I mean, we will be very aggressive in building. It takes, you know, unfortunately, years to finish out a plan. We're still working on, like, we're just getting Ash and Sash to come online and Rusk from the movement in 2015. So it's not overnight. And that's why I really do like the $100 million that we set aside, so that we can partner with some of our communities to meet some of those needs. You know, Comal County took some of their ARPA funding, and I believe they created 16, like, what we call respite beds. They did that on their own. So local communities are doing really good jobs. It's not always just the state's issue. We need to push it down to the local level, especially on those beds that are, you know, diversion beds, and they will come up with the solutions.
Yes, you had a question. Hold on. He was next, then we'll come to you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, Senator, you mentioned that for Lubbock State Hospital, you were able to secure land already. I'm wondering if you've been able to do that in all the other hospitals that you're planning to build. And then you mentioned a little bit the timeline, it's going to take years. But is there any projection of when should we start seeing the construction in some of these hospitals?
Yeah, so it's interesting in Lubbock, their local mental health authority, we funded with some of the ARPA funding, we funded about 20 new beds. We're going to add to that and having the non-maximum security, but we're also going to go to some property the state already owns and be able to do maximum security. So they're going to kind of get a mixture of both. Amarillo, I believe, Governor, we have some donated land out there, and I will say that also in the Rio Grande, we're doing some maximum security down there, and then we're also going to put out to contract some contracted beds that we partner with. We did a great job in Montgomery County. Honestly, they have 100 forensic beds there that Montgomery County Commissioners Court built. We partner with a company. They are some of our least expensive beds and some of our most effective beds. And so I didn't want to be so rigid to say the state builds it, the state runs it. If you really look at the cost of the state running some of these beds, they're the most expensive. We have been in Palestine. We were able to contract, kudos to Health and Human Services Commission. They were able to contract with a local hospital there to create some beds. And so we were able to contract with them on some beds that are about half the price of what it costs the state to run a bed.
Really
Combination.
try to be as smart as we can with the money, and the answer when they come online as soon as they can. You know, and everything we're doing, whether it's building more power for the grid, you know, it takes years sometimes to build a hospital. You know, the planning, actually opening it up, it took us that time with Rusk, but you have to start. And so this is the big start. And I would say that this is just really step 2. Step 1 in 15, when we took the money out of the rainy day fund, and we spent about $1 billion over about $200 million per hospital, roughly. And this is a big step 2, but this should be ongoing because our population continues to grow. I mean, we've added 11 million, 12 million people since 2000. Well, we have to keep up with our growth in many areas, but with healthcare. The touch is 40%, you know, depending on whether it's mild depression to serious schizophrenia and all points in between. You know, mental health care impacts so many families. Yes, ma'am.
I know right now there's obviously shortages when it comes to staffing for mental health care workers and just healthcare in general.
Sure.
I know you talked about some of the incentives with the nursing scholarships. Do you
Yes.
expect those to kind of, you know, pan out by the time some of these new facilities are up and running? And are there other things the legislature is also working on to address just the reasons behind those shortages?
Awesome question. So yes, it is going to help in the long run to get them in the pipeline. But I want to tell you too that in this budget there's a pay raise for our state supported living centers and the workers at our state hospitals, and it's 39.73%. It's a very substantial, if you look at what they did in the interim, what they did in February. So it's nearly a 40% increase in the salaries, and we are seeing a good take up. So there's a number of people that are coming back to our state hospitals and our state supported living centers. So we're having more beds come online. And again, that's been one of the hard things is, okay, what beds are we going to have coming back online, and how, again, on the rebuild and coordinating it and making sure that we know all those moving parts. But we have over 600 beds the last time I checked that were not being staffed. They didn't have staff. So we have to be
Telehealth will be a
aggressive.
part of that again. Look, we don't have enough psychiatrists and psychologists just in general in our biggest cities. So, you know, there was for a while a pushback against telehealth care. Texas Tech has been doing a great job on that for a long time. Several hospitals in the Med Center in Houston. But there have been some pushback, and after COVID, everyone realized the value of telehealth. So you may not be able to have, you may have the hospital, the nursing care, and the right beds, but it may be a psychiatrist for a special area who's telehealth from somewhere else. So that's all a part of the plan. We have to grow into it, but there's a need there, and that's what we're going to do. One more question, and we'll call it a
follow up on that, I don't want to come across as pessimistic. These are obviously significant investments in rural parts of the state, particularly the Panhandle. But looking at the map offhand, you know, Southwest Texas looks like it's got some lapses in that area. And I know you mentioned Midland is going to have some new investments hypothetically.
Yeah.
Are there conversations being had about getting in sort of those areas, you know, in between Central Texas and El Paso, that area?
There just aren't a lot of people out here. Doesn't mean there aren't some people in need, but this is very few people. I've made this journey a few times. So that's why we are going to focus in Midland, where last budget we gave them $40 million to build out 100 beds just for general. They're donating the land. We're still working with them on the forensic beds. So you put a place in Midland, and this is an area, great question, it's not pessimistic, where Texas Tech does a lot of telemedicine. A lot of telemedicine out here, where they have a nurse or a physician's assistant, a nurse practitioner, because I've been out to medical school out there in the past at Tech, where they're seeing patients in clinics through here, and where they need a higher level of expertise. That's when the telehealth doctor comes in. So there are some, you know, this is Big Bend country, and some counties out there with a few thousand people, so economically it's tough to make it work. And again, our goal was to, for the forensic side, that sheriffs are, like if you're a sheriff in a rural county and you have 4 deputies and you arrest someone and you have to drive them halfway across the state or a third of across the state from the valley to San Antonio very often, you lose that deputy for the whole day. So all of this it's the general public's healthcare, mental health care issues, and it's the forensic issues, and all of that works together. So thank you all for coming. Sure, appreciate it.
Can I follow up
Yeah,
one
sure.
thing?
Yes.
I think it's a great question, and one of the things that in this area right here, I received a lot of proposals about what I call these respite beds. And that's why we set aside that $100 million, whether it's Abilene, San Angelo, those folks that's what they really want. And that's what kind of initiated my talks with the Lieutenant Governor and Senator Huffman, Chair Huffman, about saying they've got some really good ideas. Let's set this money aside, let them apply for it and be able to meet those needs. So yes, they don't need necessarily a hospital, but they may need some of these
Or small clinic.
72-hour beds. So it's a great question, and a very fair question.
But then one quick question. The House, as you know, is discussing HB2, the property tax reduction
Yes.
bill. And I'm wondering if you still stand by the idea that you won't compromise on your Senate property tax relief with them.
So let me be very clear. I said it before session. I've said it beginning of session. I've said it recently. You don't negotiate on bad math. The homestead exemption brings a $100,000 exemption to seniors. Seniors' appraisals are already capped. Under the House bill, they get 0 from the appraisal reduction. In the Senate, they get $1,000 plus the work we're doing in compression, but $1,000 just on the homestead exemption for the rest of their life. So if they retired at 65 and they live in that house till they're 85 or 90, that's $20,000 to $25,000. They get 0 from the House plan. Secondly, the bill we passed in 2019, and still it's a very complex bill, but appraisals essentially don't matter anymore. I've said that clearly, and the reason for that is we've capped local government spending at 3.5% without a vote of the people, and 2.5% for schools. So as your value goes up, they have to drop the tax rate. And by the way, I'm not the only one saying this. 31 senators voted for it. The realtors have said the appraisal drop is hurtful to the market. The business community has said it. Tax experts have said it. And the people have said it. Look, 85% of the people in the last time they could vote on exemptions voted for a homestead exemption. Well, when I came in, it was $15,000 in 2015. We raised it to 25. Last session, we raised it to 40, and now it's going to be 70,000 for people under 65 and 100,000 for people over 65. Significant savings. That's money off the table that you can never be taxed on. So just on math, their plan gives far less. Their plan disrupts the market. Their plan isn't needed on the appraisals. We agree with them on compression. And so we can negotiate on just about everything, but I do not negotiate on bad math. And if they want to have the members in the House vote against giving seniors a $100,000 exemption, that's a pretty tough vote. And if they go home next year and they say, why did you vote against me as a senior? By the way, seniors own 40% roughly of all homes. And you go home and say, well, we thought we had a better plan. Well, your senator voted for the homestead, and there's about 5 House members per senator. And so there's a handful of people who support lowering the appraisal cap. And the speaker is one of those, and he's sticking to it. And every now and then, you have to kind of acknowledge, maybe you were wrong. I have. I came in as a senator who thought appraisal caps were the answer. I learned they weren't. And that's why we designed what we designed. with Senate Bill, I guess it was 3 in 2019. And most people who saw their appraisals go up last year, we didn't hear from them in the fall because their tax bill, in the past, if your appraisal went up 8%, your tax bill would often go up 8%. Appraisals went up more than 10% for a lot of homeowners last year, but their tax bills were either kind of flat, a little down, a little up. But again, if I go back to the key issue, it's just the math. And the math doesn't work with appraisal caps, and we will not pass those. And look, here's the bottom line. It's $16 billion set aside in our budget, roughly. I think we have 16.5, they have 17. Some of ours is business, a little bit different, but we'll be at the same number in the end, whatever that number is. Well, if we don't pass a property tax cut, the budget's done. I mean, we can't leave here with $16 billion sitting on the side that we were going to give to property tax relief that the House and Senate don't agree on. So we'll work with them on compression, which we agree. We agree on most of that. But this is an issue. I'm not going to negotiate taking $20,000 out of the pockets of senior citizens over 20 years of their lifetime. I'm going to stand here for the seniors. I'm going to stand here for every homeowner, which is about $780 through the Senate plan. You know, I don't like to be argumentative. I don't like to say the speaker is wrong in his plan, but the facts are the facts. And what am I supposed to do? Go home and say, well, you know, we were going to give you a big tax cut, but the speaker was unhappy and he wanted his plan. Sometimes you just have to know when to fold your cards. And if they send the bill over, we're not doing appraisal caps. Period. End of story. Because they mean nothing to seniors and they mean nothing essentially to any homeowner in the state. And so that's where we are. And all I can say, it passed out 31-0. That should have sent a message to a lot of people that Republicans and Democrats said this was the best plan, because the senators know it. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys. That's all the time we got.